Welcome back to the Electrician Growth Show. This is the place where we bring on successful electrical contractors, talking about their stories, their lessons, and how they got started. If you would like to apply to be a guest on the Electrician Growth Show, you can go to our website, which is theelectriciangrowthshow.com. Apply there. One of us will reach out to you, and you could maybe be on the podcast next. Now, guys, today we have Matt calling out of California. Matt, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I think just diving in here, do you want to please just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and how did you get started having your own business?
My name is Matt Stoutenberg. I'm 55 years old right now, Southern California based electrical contractor. I got started, my mom was a controller for a union electrical contractor as a kid growing up. So I started out just as the warehouse boy, shop delivery driver, purchasing agent when I was in high school and, worked full time in the summer times and worked in the evenings during school years. And then saw what the guys were doing and I liked it. I like building stuff. My dad was a tool and die maker and a manufacturing engineer, in the garage. So racing motorcycles is kind of my background from a hobby perspective. So using tools and building things was always part of my life. Right out of high school, got in the apprenticeship program, went through 5-year apprenticeship program. Um, Finished that, went through the ranks, journeyman foreman, general foreman, all that kind of stuff. In my mid-20s, I also got involved in network marketing, and so started developing an entrepreneur spirit in that period of time. Didn't wanna just I like being an electrician, but didn't just wanna be a field working electrician the whole time. So, was going to college, taking business courses, also developing network marketing, which I think really fosters somebody's entrepreneur spirit. It forces you to get out there and learn how to do marketing, communicate with people, expand outside of just the trade side of things. In 2000, started my business and actually ran into a friend of mine who I went through the apprenticeship with, who had broken off and started a home improvement business. And so I started helping doing the electrical side of the work that he was selling. And it led into, excuse me, it led into just the typical residential stuff, but me on that side of my business. But at the same time, we were doing a lot of data center work, multifamily housing, tenant improvement, service work, just the full spectrum of electrical contracting type items. But then I had this developing more of a sales model going on, which fit with a lot of the network marketing experience that I had. And we developed the solar sales, design, engineering, permitting, and installing business, which grew rapidly, especially here in California at that period of time. So from the early 2000s until current, been doing a lot of residential solar, commercial industrial solar, batteries, renewable related stuff, some utility scale things. But combination between going through the trades, some network marketing on the sales and marketing side, and then that relationship I was telling you with, that had a high volume lead generation mindset. So I got to absorb a lot of what he was doing from a door canvassing, knocking doors, telemarketing, um, one call close sales model, and brought that into the electrical business that I had. And it really helped grow volume. Not that I copied all of it, but it's like I call it a shopping cart approach. You take what works for you and put it in your basket and mold your business in the direction that works for you.
Okay, beautiful. So it sounds, coming out of high school, you became an apprentice within the field. And then around mid 20s, you kind of started doing some marketing in the networking space, all of that type of stuff. And then in 2000, you started your business. What was your business when you first started? Is it the same thing that you're doing now? Has it evolved over the years?
No,
What
no,
what
it
was the
was
first business?
traditional, C10 licensed electrical contractor, um, bidding new jobs, servicing old clients, occupied spaces, new construction, service work, a lot of data center things at that, in the late 90s, we were building data centers. And then once the shell was built, we were populating the space once clients would come in. So that was a big part of the business. Um, it evolved. We started doing some utility scale solar projects as well as the traditional, what I call the core business. The core business is bid a new construction job, build it, move on to the next one, handle the service calls as they're coming in, and then facilitate the work in the ongoing client base that you have. So those are kind of the sectors that I had there. As the solar side of the business grew, created a new business. Stoutenberg Electric was my first company, and then the solar side started to almost create a conflict because it's a different business model than your traditional electrical contractor. So I created another business called Peak Power Solutions, which was more focused on sales, design, engineering, permitting, and procurement. It wasn't a labor based. I like to refer to it as administrative services. So Peak Power was facilitating the administrative services needed to build a solar or renewable project. And then we would internally sub the work to myself at Stoutenberg Electric. So it was two businesses facilitating the whole project, but one side of the business was doing the job setup and the other side was just doing the physical labor install type work. Since I've sold Stoutenberg Electric, I sold that in 2015. So 15 years later, sold that and started to focus primarily on just peak power, the solar side of the business.
Okay, beautiful. So you started with one, and then you decided to open up a second one, which is peak power. Why did you want to open a second business? Did you just see an opportunity? Did you want to make more money? What was the whole idea behind that?
It was a way to capture more work from people that would have viewed us to be competing with them otherwise. So as the installer, I couldn't go out to other installers and get their work. But as Peak Power, a sales and marketing company, I was able to go out and find other people who were selling things that need things built and facilitate their work. So I found that in the solar space, there's a lot of people that are just selling. That's all they do. They don't know the design, engineer, permit, procurement, install side of things. So it was a way of capturing more work and feeding it all to Stoutenberg Electric to build the projects. That was always my primary focus. And then some other things had happened in the course of time. That friend of mine that I had told you about that had the home improvement business, he put it up for sale, and that business sold quite successfully. And I continued a relationship with the new owners. They were some investment bankers, and shortly thereafter, this was like '07. Shortly thereafter, fourth quarter of '08, credit crisis happens. Home improvement products aren't really selling. People aren't qualifying for loans, but solar was still selling. So that got kind of ugly a little bit. They actually owed me almost $2 million at that point in time and stopped paying and tried to hire all my employees to kind of take over my business. That that company basically evolved into what's now known as Sunrun, which you may have heard of. They're a nationwide solar, you know, trying to be a utility company, but we were the beginning of that side of the business. There's a lot of story in between there that I'll leave out just for the sake of time. I could eat up a 4-hour podcast in that episode of entrepreneurship by itself. But when that happened, a lot of the core business that was in place during that when that business sold, um, a lot of those employees left and they went and started their own sales organizations, but they knew me as the builder. So it really grew. We went from, in 2002, we were just trying to figure it out. 2004, we were probably doing 50 jobs a year. By '06, we were doing almost 200 jobs a month. And then it got to the point by '08 where it was 250 residential projects a month. And then it all kind of broke up to a bunch of little small groups that I was serving. So it all just evolved where we're creating a separate business that didn't conflict with the traditional process of a core electrical contracting company. I've got union electricians coming in the door in the morning doing their thing. And then over here, I've got another office with guys that are focusing on residential sales related issues, and the two just they just don't mix in the same office. So kind of circle back to answer your question. The reason that I created another business is it was an entirely different culture that was evolving. It was more of a sales marketing and engineering culture versus a bid build culture.
Yeah, I hear. Because if you think about it, like having an electrical contracting business, you're providing a service to people that, they need it in a sense. Like they're building a new house, you need an electrical contractor. It's like you have a problem at your home, you need an electrical contractor. But people don't necessarily need solar solutions, right?
Right.
But they provide lots of value. So that's when like the whole like sales marketing, the sales model kind of comes in. It's a completely different market. You're solving a same problem, but it's essentially the same skill set. So I want to dive in here. Well, quickly, when did you open Peak Power? When did that start? Because you started in 2000, but when did you start your second
Yeah,
business?
yeah. Let me you just brought up something really good. Let me shed a little bit of light on why. You just answered a little bit why. With Stoutenberg Electric as a core electrical contracting company, one of the questions that was always difficult to answer is what's next year's revenue going to look like? And you kind of don't know. It's a really difficult way to predict growth. You've got your ongoing clients that may or may not need work. And then you've got bids that you don't necessarily know that you may or may not win. So it's really difficult to predict any type of revenue growth. But what I had learned through the sales model is with people that don't need it, but I can go out and sell it, I can impact my own growth by selling a product that is repetitive, right? It's duplicatable. We can sell it, build it, go do it again, sell it, build it, go do it again. Where on the electrical contracting side, every job's different. It's got its own time frame, its own character, its own parts and pieces and design. So it's not something that I can duplicate. So I liked the duplicatability of a sales model type contracting business.
Yeah, it's a
So
system
a
in a
system.
sense.
Yeah, I could
It's
systematize it.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
repeatable. You can train it. As with the other thing, it's not as easy to do so.
Right.
So
So
I
the
actually want to,
your question as far as when did I start peak power? I
yeah,
started Stoutenberg Electric in 2000, and peak power was officially incorporated in 2005. But to say when I started, I feel like I started it in 2002. I just didn't realize that I was starting another business. To me, when we first started doing it, it was just more electrical work. It's just a different product. But once it started to take on a different character, 2005 was when I incorporated it and then gave it a new name and realized, okay, this is a different business model entirely.
yeah. So started roughly 2002, but really became peak power in
Yeah.
2005.
Yep.
How would you say the sales model evolved from 2005 and until now?
Hmm. Well, we were following what was working up until that point. At the time, there was a lot of telemarketing, door knocking, working home shows, a lot of effort put into lead generation and having sales reps try to, go to homes and do the one call close thing. Financing was really good in the beginning. From 2000 to 2000 and late six, early seven, subprime lending was the soup du jour, right? Everybody could get a loan. You just fog a mirror, you get a loan. So sales were relatively easier back then, even though the cost of things was substantially higher than it is now. Sales were easier. When the credit crisis happened, financing tightened up, leasing got more popular. I'm still to this day not really a big fan of the lease PPA model on a residential application. Works totally different for commercial, but on the higher volume residential customer side, not a big fan of it, but that really started to grow and become 60, 70, 80% of the market. So we did that. And then it evolved into what's called a dealer model where you've got guys that are just out knocking doors and selling deals, and they bring those deals to you as as a 1099 independent salesperson rather than an employee. And then in about 2015, I stopped doing all those entirely, and we basically operated off of referral only. With 10,000 systems installed statewide, the phone rings pretty consistently. So we downsized and going from the multiple hundred digit they're multiple hundred installs a month down to 20 to 30 installs a month, keeping it, I got rid of a lot of the overhead. I really sharpened up the business. Headaches went away, margins went up, costs went down. It really streamlined. So went away from sending people into the home and started selling like a Zoom call, or at the time, GoToMeeting was the platform that we used. And we started doing that in 2013, which was, I think, pretty ahead of the curve. There wasn't really a whole lot of people selling anything virtually, at least in the construction solar space in 2013. So that was a big relief to a lot of my sales reps, where they were spending anywhere from 4 to 8 hours of their day just driving around, sitting in Southern California traffic, going to their next lead, hoping to sell a deal, where they could actually hit more deals, more opportunities, sitting behind a computer pitching deals virtually.
Okay. And are you guys still doing the virtual model today?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's quite unique for even newer solar companies now. A lot of people are still doing the guerrilla door knocking, getting their face out there. You guys are fully virtual.
Yeah. We still offer, hey, if you want us to come to site, we'll come to site. There's no reason not to, but we can be a lot more effective over a Zoom call, where I've got my tools on my screen. I can slide documents in and off. The sales reps we can record it, and they can be trained off of other people's scenarios. So um, you get a lot more um, training opportunities and experiences by recording sales pitches and then letting other people watch how they evolve. So
So I guess, do you have a team? I'm assuming you have a team of people who do these virtually, and are these sales reps that are do these just like remote sales reps, or are these people who understand the electrical work, they understand solar? Who are the people actually taking the calls?
you know, through the process of this business and meeting people, it's a smaller team of people that have been doing it for years. They understand the build side. They're not necessarily tradespeople. They're salespeople, but they've been doing it so long, they understand what's being built, what the product is, what the customer is expecting, and it's not just a um, finance only sales, where it's just price based savings only. No, they're able to talk about the ins and outs and nuts and bolts of what's being built in the sale process with experience, not field
Okay.
experience, but years of experience, having been doing the same thing for a long time. I mean, talking people 15 plus years.
Okay. Got it. So switching gears here a little bit, I guess, what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced and overcome as an entrepreneur since 2005 until now?
Um, well, especially in the solar space, because now, I am an electrician and electrical contractor by trade, but most of the volume of revenue that I do is in the renewable space. So, what really made renewables work, especially in California, but in the entire country, have primarily been three things. Low interest rates were really helpful. Net metering incentives from the utility, which is the relationship in which solar generation is recognized by the utility. If you're producing more than you're consuming, you get credit for that on your bill. That's all gone away. And then tax credits. So, um, believe it or not, the nuts and the bolts of building a solar project aren't all that difficult. The difficulty is the political environment that is constantly changing, where you've got states that are pushing regulations, while at the same time you've got cities that are imposing code guidelines, fire guidelines that are like restrictions. It's a tug of war, push to go do this, but it gets more and more headwind as you're doing it. It's becoming more and more difficult to just successfully sell a job and go build it. We've got we've got conflicting fire guidelines and codes between cities, and what you can do in one city you can't do in another, and sometimes those have cost impacts. So you can't sell a widget the same in two different jurisdictions, because you're going to have a different cost impact in that one than you are in another one, and you don't always know what those cost impacts are going to be. So those tax credit changes, interest rate changes, and net metering changes have been the three biggest issues. But this industry takes a blow to the knees about every 6 months with some sort of policy change, political change, utility change, tariffs. Tariffs change pricings on things. So um, it it's always evolving. You know, when as an electrician, you get into solar and you're like, oh, what's the big deal? It's just some solar panels and inverter. I do far more complex work in a data center for sure. But it's the regulatory environment that's changing underneath the industry that keeps it like drinking from a fire hose learning process the whole time.
Yeah. And why do you think there's so much, change and all these different rules and regulations constantly changing and there's so much talk in the space? Why do you think that is happening?
That's a loaded question because you kind of come at it from you can come at it from both sides. There are those politically that are trying to push one agenda and those that are opposing it. Both may have some logic and reason, and both may be lacking some logic and reason. And the pendulum swings heavy. So um, you know, as a business owner, entrepreneur, you get invested in a direction, and then all of a sudden it changes, and you gotta shift, and you gotta adjust, and there's been a lot of fallout especially in the solar space, the renewable space, because of this. I tend to think that solar, the way I've modeled my business and my thought, whether I'm right or wrong, don't know, but I view a successful electrical solar contractor as more modeled behind like a local HVAC contractor where there have been years of companies trying to what I refer to as rule the world. We're going to be this national brand and take over the country and we'll be the most. It's all been about market share, always trying to just capture market share, and they spend a bunch of money in advertising, they get some perceived market share, and they're not stable and they collapse. Whereas if you wake up, service your local market, don't try to be things that you're not, don't try to grow outside. Like Southern California, there's so much market here. If you can't succeed in a market like this, you got no right going to other states. Figure out your own backyard before you try to expand and go other places. So my philosophy is just master my backyard and stay healthy and solid in that market. There's plenty of market to there, and not let my ego get in the way and try to take over more than I really need. I don't know if I
Yeah.
answered your question. I might have digressed off
No,
of your question a little bit there, but
no, it's all good. It's all good. But touching on something that you just said here, it's like there's so much market here in California.
yeah.
Like you have no right trying to expand and go or even switch to a completely different state. I guess, what are some things from your experience, somebody who's new to this industry, that would hold them back from doing a good job and not being able to really conquer their backyard?
What would hold them back?
Yeah. What would hold them back? So, like, if let's say somebody wanted to start their own solar company in California,
Mhm.
and what are some things that you would advise them to do or to not do in the space so they don't run into any problems, run into any issues, or,
I
to not become successful?
I'm a big fan of start small and to manage a lot, you must first manage a little. So manage if you got a little, then just manage that right and it'll continue to grow. Work breeds work. So if you're doing good work, it'll bring more good work. I think a big mistake that I've seen a lot of people make is they try to they try to grow too fast and they can't handle it. They get over leveraged, whether it's with securing trucks and tools and office space and equipment and don't have the revenue to support the overhead. I would say stay as lean as you can. And this isn't new news, right? In the contracting space, stay as lean as you possibly can, as long as you possibly can. Keep your costs down because the trades fluctuate. You have feast and famine periods of time. So you got to be able to make it through the famine periods of time to get to the next feast, and staying lean is a great way to do it. So what should they do? They shouldn't go out and take on too much too quick.
Is that something that you experienced in your journey as an entrepreneur? Was there ever a moment where you tried to expand too fast, too quick, and you ran into a problem, you ran into an issue?
We managed through it, but there were definitely times in hindsight where it's like probably wasn't right for me to take on some certain projects. You know, when you're, I mean, we doubled our revenue every year for like the first 10 years. It was crazy. You know, you go from 500,000 to a million to 2 million to 4 million to 16. Next thing you know, you're doing $50 million worth of revenue, and you're still in the same office space that you were in, but you're starting to think that, wow, this growth is just, it's just automatic. It's just going to keep happening. So you you know, we probably took on some projects. We got through them, but you take on some projects that are over your head and run into cash flow issues and payroll issues, and got to go get loans, and it just adds a level of burden and stress to the deal that may not be necessary if you just look further ahead and take slightly smaller steps. I think biting off more than you can chew sometimes can keep you up at night, and that's not a healthy way to live. You know, I mean, we took on some at the time early on some $4 or $5 million projects at the same time, so you just get spread thin. You know, where it's like one of those jobs would have been all we could handle, and all of a sudden we got three of them going on. Shit, you know, don't take on more than you can handle.
Yeah, understood. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'll wrap it up with one last question here. I guess if you could go back to day one when you first started back in 2000,
Uh-huh.
what's one thing you would tell your younger self?
Wow, that's a what's one thing I'd tell my younger self? Buy Google stock. Um, keep. I would say I would tell my younger self that it all the effort will pay off, because it does. Keep going when things get tough. Just I still tell it to myself. It just get up and do the same thing you've been doing, and the results will continue. You know, not every day is easy, but just you get up and you work, and that provides results. Don't get discouraged on hard days, because they're going to be there.
Okay, beautiful. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say before we hop off here?
No, I appreciate the opportunity and the interview, and happy to do it again if you ever need to.
Okay, perfect. Where can our listeners find you online? Is there social medias, websites, etc.?
Yeah, you can go to Team Peak Power on Instagram, Facebook. YouTube is Team Peak Power Solutions. And then our website is peakpowerus.com.
Okay, amazing. Well, like I said at the beginning, if you're in the space and you would like to come on to the show, you can reach out. You can go to our website, which is the electriciangrowthpodcast.com. Fill out the application there. One of us might reach out. We'll have the discussion, see if it's a fit, and you could be on the podcast next. All right, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for the invite.